Okay, this is lecture number, I think, 7. 7 on fallacies. This is the last class on logic, which means after today we'll have gone through 2 of the 3 parts of the trivium. So we'll have finished grammar. We just kind of did a cursory quick thing on grammar, and we're finishing logic, and then we're going to spend 5 nice weeks on rhetoric, which ties a lot together. And even Sister Miriam, in her book, says that rhetoric is sort of the crown of the 3. Though she doesn't actually spend much time on rhetoric in her book, she kind of goes straight from logic to what I would call poetics. So she has a chapter on induction, and then the last sort of section is called composition and reading, but it's really, some interesting things about poetic style and story structure, stuff like that, which is beautiful. It's great. If you want to read it, please feel free. She's really good at what she does in explaining that. But we're going to be finished with this book after today, and we're going to go straight into rhetoric. We're going to use 2 books mostly for that. This one I mentioned before, The Office of Assertion, and then I'm going to give you, there's PDFs on Aristotle's rhetoric. So Aristotle has a book on rhetoric, and we're going to work through actually most of that, almost that entire book we're going to read. And in those PDFs that are posted on Blackboard, there are class notes from when I taught rhetoric as, again, an entire class, just on Aristotle's rhetoric. So here's what made a reader looks like. You don't have to buy this. It's all the relevant PDFs are on the book. But in those PDFs, there are selections from Aristotle. Then at the end of that, there are my class notes, which I'm going to spend a lot of time looking at. And from the Aristotle readings, if you want to sort of skim through them, I'm just being really honest here, and just go to the class notes and try to understand what's going on, once in a while you might want to do that. There are some, I would actually definitely read the first reading thoroughly. After that, I think the reading on emotions, it's a few weeks in. It's pretty long, and it might be kind of tiresome for you, so you might want to just jump to the notes if you can understand what the notes are. They're really, really compressed. So, so there's my class notes, and then after my class notes, there are selections of literature that I give to sort of challenge the student, see if you can apply what you learned in this class to this piece of literature. Maybe this literature is a good example of what I talked about in those class notes. So that's what we're going to go to. We're going to go to this Kreider book, and then specifically my rhetoric reader, which is Aristotle's rhetoric plus a lot of notes and selections of literature and so on. And that'll take us basically to the end of the semester. There'll just be one last week on this book, Leisure, the Basis of Culture, a few chapters of this book, which again I have a PDF of posted on Blackboard. So, and then we'll be done. So today we're going to talk about fallacies. And I want to start by mentioning 2 notes. One, the simpler of the 2 notes. There are philosophers, very competent, very intelligent philosophers, who have spent a lot of time and a lot of thought chronicling and listing and organizing many, 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 many fallacies. I mean, I would probably guess that there's probably maybe over 100 or maybe hundreds of different fallacies that people have kind of named and categorized. And if you're interested in that, look it up on the internet. Just look up list of fallacies, and there's going to be all kinds of different lists. And everyone has their own type of way to organize them. Everyone has things that they would count as fallacies. And there's sort of new ones every year because people learn how to think badly more and more every year. So a fallacy, so if you don't know what it is, a fallacy is a mistake in thinking. And it's a mistake in thinking that's so common among human beings that it has its own name. That's how common it is. And what we're going to go through today, I actually really very much like the way Sister Miriam organized and sort of selected the fallacies that are in this book. I have my own selection in my own logic reader. I think they're both fine. I actually like the way she did it really, well. I don't know if it's better than mine. Yeah, it might be better than mine. I don't know. And one of the main things I like about it is that she's very selective. There aren't hundreds and hundreds of them. There are a couple of dozen maybe, tops. And I think that's perfectly fine. I don't think we need to like be that thorough. This is not the most scientific part of studying logic. Really, when you're talking about fallacies, you're going to make a list. And if you want to organize the list into sub-lists, that's great. She does that pretty well. But that's kind of about it. It's just sort of learn what is it to do an ad hominem. You hear that phrase, here's what it means. What's a straw man argument? What is what does begging the question mean? What is a false cause? Just sort of being aware of these really common ones. And if you find somebody pointing out a fallacy that's not in this list, just look it up on Google. It'll probably be really easy to understand. So I hope this is kind of a more relaxed session of class. And a good way to kind of wrap up logic. Again, there's going to be a quiz after today's, I suggest strongly doing it after today's class before you get into the rhetoric stuff, because it's kind of a different world there. So I would take the logic quiz while my mind was still fresh. Although, just do recall that the final exam for this course is all inclusive. It is on the syllabus, the schedule of readings in the syllabus. The final exam, it says right there, is on classes 1 to 14. It's on the entire semester. So don't forget to study for the earlier stuff when you're studying for the final. Okay. So anyway, that was one thing, that people organize fallacies in different ways, and that's perfectly fine. The second thing is this. I want to talk about why study fallacies at all. We have spent several weeks talking about how to think correctly, and to kind of reflect on how the mind normally operates and how to sort of refine it so that it operates as well as it possibly can. We've talked about the 3 acts of the intellect. We've talked about how to have clear terms, how to even maybe not. Today we're going to talk about one of the fallacies is called equivocation, where you use a word in 2 different senses. And you can see how that can lead to all kinds of invalid conclusions. So you want to use the word in the same way when you're making an argument. You don't want to equivocate. You want to have clear definitions. All that's the first act of the intellect. You want to make sure that all your premises are true, which is the second act of the intellect, the act of judgment. And you want to make sure that your reasoning is valid. And we spent 2 good weeks on sort of forms of that. These 3 acts of the intellect. So now, after we've done all that, if you know what the right way to think is, why would you want to study the wrong way to think? There's a couple of different reasons. Number one, these are fallacies that have famous names for a reason. They are mistakes that people make all the time. And most of us are probably not a lot smarter than all kinds of other people that are making these mistakes. So to be aware of the kind of mistake that people very often make is a good thing to do, because we're prone to make the same kinds of mistakes as everybody else is. So that's number one. And just because we know the correct way, we've kind of reflected on over the last few weeks, to think doesn't mean we're infallible now and we can never make a possible mistake. No, and to sort of point out this specific thing you want to be careful about, because a lot of people make this mistake. I think that's a good thing to do, to sort of be cautious and to learn from other people's mistakes. That's one. 2, it's important to learn about fallacies because people use them all the time, sometimes unconsciously, they don't know it, and sometimes maybe they know what they're doing and they actually want to take advantage of you. And most scams, many commercials and advertisements, a lot of what's called marketing is really just taking fallacies and making them kind of convincing. And so it's important to study fallacies so that you don't get taken advantage of by somebody using them. I mean, lots of politics is full of fallacies. Arguments about philosophy, lots of arguments about religion, they use various fallacies. They'll accuse, and again, I want to reiterate my first point. It's very, I think, ignorant and uneducated of someone for someone to just assume everybody else is using fallacies, but I'm not. I think that's the kind of arrogance that betrays a lack of education. So it's really kind of, it shows that somebody is uneducated when they say, oh man, look at all these, insert religion here, look at all these Muslims, look at all these Buddhists, look at all these Hindus committing all these fallacies. Man, it's a good thing Catholics never do that. It's a good thing Christians never do that. Have you been on Twitter? Have you talked to somebody on any kind of social media? Have you been on Reddit? Everybody commits fallacies, and religion is not really a kind of dividing factor here. It seems like something that all people of all faiths can hold hands and embrace together is the committing of fallacies. Similarly with politics, I think it's actually a very dumb way to go about things to say, oh man, I'm glad I'm not like one of those Democrats because all those guys do is commit fallacies. We Republicans never do that, or vice versa. And man, it's a way to kind of dig yourself into a hole where you almost guarantee you're not really going to be objective, and you're never really going to understand the truth of what's going on if you just always go under the presumption that mistakes are for everybody else and good thinking is just for me and my team or my group. I think that's just a very bad way to go about things. It's also a way to further divide people in a way that, in an excessive way. People are going to be divided naturally because there are different beliefs, but this adds to it in a way that's not really correct. So I think those are two good reasons to study fallacies. It's not very difficult to do, and it's kind of a fun, I think a lot of people find it fun to take a look at fallacies and, reflect on, I guess I have committed this, or, oh man, I guess, you know what, I have seen that, or I've noticed that. I will invite you to keep your eyes out for these, and maybe in the next couple of weeks, while these are fresh in your mind, look for some of these fallacies, and I'll give you some tips if you want to find just an absolute gold mine of fallacies. There's a couple different places you can look. One, YouTube comments on YouTube videos, full of just absolute gold mine of fallacies. Amazon book reviews, especially 1-star reviews on books that don't deserve it, absolute gold mine of fallacies. Places like that. Reddit, I don't go on Reddit often, but every time I do, I regret it, and it's great. Things like that. So basically the internet in general is a place you can go to find lots of fallacies. Political debates, almost nothing but fallacies. Most of those news shows where they're not really about news, they're about attacking the other viewpoint, those are basically just nothing but just a list, just one fallacy after another. So these are places, if you want to kind of practice what you learned today, go on any one of those types of media and you'll find plenty. Okay, so what are the fallacies of equivocation, amphiboly, and accent? Okay, right away I'm jumping into 3 of them that are vaguely related because they're fallacies in speaking. So if you go to page 188, Sister Miriam, oh my gosh, I just spilled this. Hold on. Let me pause this and clean it up. Sorry. Okay, I cleaned it up. I hope that was entertaining to you. I spilled my drink. Okay. She categorizes fallacies into a couple of different things. One is formal fallacies. I guess that's at the bottom of 187. She describes what a formal fallacy is. They arise from the violation of rules governing the formal relations of propositions. So a formal fallacy is when a syllogism is invalid or something is invalid in the argument itself. She makes a long list of formal fallacies. You can go ahead and look at those if you want. I'm not going to worry so much about her categorizations. Maybe this is, I don't know, this is my attitude towards fallacies. I don't see any reason really to categorize them other than to just kind of keep them clear in your head. But even then, I'm not sure why somebody would want to do that. Just learn the fallacy. And then so there's formal fallacies, and then there's material fallacies, have the root in the matter, in the terms, in the ideas, and the symbols. So that categorization of formal versus material fallacy, I'm going to give her that. That's a good kind of distinction. Beyond that, there's fallacies of opposition, fallacies of education, fallacies of the syllogistic relation. I don't know. I guess if you feel like doing that and this is a way that helps you learn, go for it. It's there on page 187, 188. But the first subgroup of, I guess these would be material fallacies, would be what she's calling on page 188, fallacies in dictione. So fallacies in speaking. So they have to do with the fallacies of language, basically. So these have to do with the way we speak about things. The first one I already mentioned, actually, is the first one on my review question, is the fallacy of equivocation. Equivocation is a fallacy occasioned by the ambiguity of a word which symbolizes two or more different terms. So there can be one word, like one sound, it's the same sound, but it really refers to two different realities. Puns, all puns are based on equivocation, which is why they're not really very funny. So the example that she gives, feathers are light. Light is the opposite of darkness. Therefore, feathers are the opposite of darkness. Do you see the fallacy there? Feathers are light. Well, light in that sense means not heavy. The second way that she uses light is the opposite of darkness. Well, that doesn't mean the opposite of heavy is the opposite of darkness. No. Light can mean not heavy, and it can also mean, the thing that allows us to see things around us, or whatever, photons, or however you want to define light. So the sound light means two different things. That can lead to all kinds of mistakes. Now, this is a really blatant one. Feathers are light. Light is the opposite of darkness. The dog barked at the tree. The tree has bark on it. The word bark means two totally different things. They're not even related, I don't think, like linguistically or etymologically. However, a lot of times it's kind of subtle. It's a little bit sneaky how this one term means two different things. And you'll see things like, unity. We want unity. Well, the word unity means all kinds of different things. Let's be one. Let's be together. Well, together. I want you to be supportive. I want you to be kind. The word kind can mean millions of different things depending on the situation. And sometimes it's okay, the right thing to do, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes being kind is not the right thing to do. If somebody maybe needs some tough love, so being kind sometimes is loving and sometimes it's not. So the word kindness can mean all kinds of things. Love can mean all kinds of different things. Even from the sort of classical era, the word love can be just a pure feeling and emotion. It can be a kind of a decision or an activity. I think even within the sort of emotion part of love, I don't think it's the same thing. I think the way that somebody loves their children is kind of different than the way that somebody would love their spouse. I would hope so, at least, And the way that somebody loves pizza, hopefully, is different than the way somebody loves, their spouse or something, or one of their friends, unless they're a cannibal or something like that. So even the word love, even when it's being used as an emotion, where like you're drawn to something, you kind of desire it, even there's distinctions within it. And if you use the word, it always means the same thing, you're going to commit equivocation and you're going to fall into all kinds of mistakes in doing that. So that's equivocation. The way to avoid it is to just really be clear on what you mean by words. And that's why it's constantly important to ask, can you give me a definition of what that is? Can you define, please and to stop a conversation and say, just, what do you mean by that word exactly? Just so I know, just so we're on the same page. And I will tell you this, a big bulk of, if you want to see right here, there, is my copy of the Summa Theologica of Thomas Aquinas. And I have another copy here in Latin and English. A lot of the work he does there, in the bodies of his articles, where Aquinas is asking a question and wants to answer the question, a lot of the work that he does is disambiguating, is saying, this word actually means two different things. Let's clarify what we're talking about. He is like famous for doing that constantly. The word such and such actually is used in two different senses. And when he clarifies them, and then all of a sudden the question is a lot clearer, like, oh, and that's some of the most eye-opening stuff that Aquinas does, is distinguishing different senses of a word. And it really solves a lot of problems. So equivocation is sort of maybe the main fallacy that people can commit in a kind of unconscious way. Okay, so that's equivocation. The next one is called Amphiboly, and that is on the next page. Amphiboly is a fallacy produced by ambiguity of syntax or grammatical structure, such as a misplaced or dangling matifier, ambiguous reference pronouns, ambiguity of word order. So, for example, go to the middle of the page. She has some nice examples here. He told his brother that he had won the prize. Do you see how that's unclear? Who won the prize, the guy or his brother? The Duke yet lives. Oh, that's pretty good, actually. So the first example she gives, the Duke yet lives, that Henry shall depose. You see how that's not clear? The Duke does it mean the Duke that shall depose Henry yet lives? Or is it the Duke that Henry shall depose yet lives? Because in Shakespeare's time, the word order was not as rigid as it is today. See what I mean? So an unclear syntax can make people accidentally fall into this fallacy of amphiboly. I don't see that as one that people would use to take advantage of you or kind of do on purpose, but who knows? People are creative. The third one that I'm going to rank, that I'm going to put with equivocation and amphiboly is called accent. If you go to page 190, at the bottom of 190, the fallacy of accent. The accent fallacy occurs when a meaning different from that intended is conveyed through a special emphasis on certain letters, syllables, words, or ideas. So this happens actually all the time when you're texting. And when you're texting, people don't hear the way you're speaking, and you don't notice the way. So in your mind, you're stressing one word. When they receive the text, they might hear a stress on another word, and you can really misunderstand things. There's a Key and Peele sketch where two guys are texting each other, and because they can't hear each other's like voice and the way they're saying things, one guy thinks he's being totally friendly, the other guy thinks that his friend is picking a fight, and it's pretty funny. But I'm going to give you an example of this myself, actually. Not hers are okay, but they're a little confusing. There's an old song that's where one of the lyrics is, "We didn't start the fire." You might know that song. We didn't start the fire. Depending on what word you stress, it can mean a bunch of different things. So let's say you stress it this way. Let's say you say, "We didn't start the fire." It's the same words. That all these examples I'm going to give you are the same words. But if you say, "We didn't start the fire," what does that imply? Well, it implies that somebody else did. Okay, so it sort of implies something. Let's say I stress it this way. Let's say I say, "We didn't start the fire." What does that imply? It's the same exact words. What does it imply when you say, "We didn't start the fire"? Well, it implies that, we didn't start it, but we added to it. We threw some fuel on it. What if I were to stress it in this way? What if I were to say, "We didn't start the fire"? What does that imply? Well, it implies that we started something else. And they're exactly the same words, but depending on how you stress it, the sentence can mean something totally different. So that is the fallacy of accent. Again, what does it mean? It means as you're writing, become more and more conscious that the person that is reading your email or text or essay or book or whatever, the person who's reading it can't hear you, and they can't hear your thoughts. So imagine you're reading it for the first time, and is there any place where maybe you're accidentally committing this fallacy of accent? Okay, so that's number one. What are the fallacies of equivocation, amphiboly, and accent? Let's say I were to put some of these things on a quiz, I would probably say, choose the example that is, that represents the fallacy of equivocation, and I'll give some examples, and you have to click the one that's equivocation. All right, number 2. What are the fallacies of composition and of division? Go back a little bit. Go back to page 189. The fallacy of composition occurs when the properties of the parts are illicitly predicated of the whole. So, these are all really good examples, and a lot of this has to do with physics and chemistry. Look at this example on page 190. Sodium and chlorine are toxic elements. Toxic elements are harmful, therefore sodium chloride is harmful. So sodium and chlorine are toxic. They'll hurt you if you ingest them. Sodium chloride is made of sodium and chlorine. But sodium chloride is salt. So just because the parts of something have a certain characteristic, that doesn't mean that the combination of those parts shares that characteristic. And it's just kind of a funny fact of chemistry that you can take two things that are harmful and put them together and they're totally fine. Yeah, that's a very good example. I can't think of a better one than that. So that's the fallacy of composition. The fallacy of division is, on page 190, is just the reverse of composition. It occurs when the properties of the whole are illicitly predicated of the parts. 9 and 7 is 16. 16 is an even number, therefore 9 and 7 are even numbers. Okay, that's blatantly, you can see how that's an easy fallacy. You can also do something like, I don't know, you could do it with the body parts, right? You can say, like, I feel cold and sad and loving. And I am made up of my parts, and therefore, like, my fingernails feel cold and loving. You know, see what I mean? No, there are certain things that are true of the whole that are not true of its parts. So that's the fallacy of division. See if I can drink without spilling this everywhere. Okay. Number 3. What is the fallacy of accident? So now, page 193, she is shifting from fallacies of language in dictione to fallacies extra dictionem. They are fallacy of accident, confusion of absolute and qualified statements, fallacy of consequent. Yeah, she's doing your categorization thing. Don't worry about that. The fallacy of accident, bottom of 193. This fallacy arises from the false assumption that whatever is predicable of a subject, usually the middle term, is predicable of its accident, the minor term. And in the same sense, or that whatever is predicable of a term understood in one aspect, for example, specifically or concretely, is predicable of the same term understood in another aspect, for example, generally or abstractly. Okay, I don't know if I would use those words to explain what the fallacy of accident is. The fallacy of accident is, just because something is true in one sense doesn't mean it's true in every sense. So, let's say you visit California. If I knew Texas highways, I would use Texas highways, but I don't know Texas roads. Let's say you visit California. And let's say you come to San Diego and you are driving and you get on Highway 15 and you're going on 15 north. And the person you're driving with says, "Oh, is this the highway that goes to Vegas?" And you say yes, because Highway 15 goes from San Diego to Las Vegas. So your friend who says, "Okay, is this the highway that goes to Las Vegas?" You say yes. And then your friend looks around and she says, "Wow, all these cars are on the road that goes to Las Vegas." And you kind of squint your eyes and you say, "Yes." And then she says, "That means all these cars are going to Las Vegas." Do you see the fallacy there? Yes, it is true to say that 15 is the highway that goes from San Diego to Las Vegas. But there's all kinds of other things that are true about it too. And that doesn't mean that every single person that is on 15 is going to Las Vegas. There's all kinds of other places that 15 can take you to. So that's the fallacy of accident. You can say, and it's actually a quite common fallacy. In fact, here's a really good example actually she gives. Look at page 194. To communicate knowledge is commendable. It's a good thing to share information, right? Gossiping is sharing information. Therefore, gossip is commendable. Oh, no, it's not. But it's sharing information. But again, it's true to say that sharing information is a good thing in general, but not every single time you do it. And so it's true in one sense, but it's not true in every sense. And so if you take something that's true in one sense and apply it in the sense that it wasn't meant, then you're going to fall into the fallacy of accident. One of the ways you could do this is, we talked about the different ways things can be different and the same. So let me go back to these pens. So I've got 2 Pilot G207s. So you get the same 2 pens. Actually, these are 2 different, slightly different G207s. See if you can tell the difference. You want to know the difference? They just came out with these. These have a matte black case instead of a see-through case. I'm really excited about this. Anyway, are these the same pen? Well, in one sense, they are the same. They're specifically the same. But individually, they're different. And so if you were to misuse either of those words, same or different, and say, oh, no, these are different pens. Well, that means one of them's not a Pilot G2. Well, no, I don't mean different in that way. I mean it I mean it individually. So again, that's another fallacy, a way to commit the fallacy of accident. So this is a very, very common one as well. Be very careful when a certain thing is said of something else. In what sense is that true? Okay, so that's the fallacy of accident. What is the fallacy of secundum quid? I'm skipping quite a bit in some cases because it's just so obvious that once you read it, you get it. In other cases, I just don't know how common those fallacies are. So page 199, confusion of absolute and qualified statement, or secundum quid. The term secundum quid means following this. This fallacy, which is commonly used to deceive, can also cause self-deception. It results from the seeming smallness of the difference involved in the qualification. As a tool of deception, it consists, 1, in getting assent to a qualified statement and proceeding as if the statement had been conceded absolutely, or vice versa, in proceeding from a statement a qualified way. Okay, this is very, very, very close to the fallacy of accident. Look at the examples. God says, thou shalt not kill. Therefore, killing animals for meat is wicked. That's not what God meant when he said that, for better or worse. No offense if anybody's vegan or something like that, but that's not really what the commandment means. To suffer death unjustly is preferable to suffering death justly. Therefore, what takes place unjustly is preferable to what takes place unjustly. Whoso drinketh well, sleepeth well. All right. Oh, this is funny. Okay. He who drinks well, sleeps well. He who sleeps well doesn't sin. He who doesn't sin is blessed. Therefore, whoever drinks well shall be blessed. Yeah, there's all kinds of confusion there. So how is this different from the fallacy of accident? The secundum quid, you're confused. So the way she says it, the way she describes it is correct. The confusion of absolute and qualified statement. So there are certain things, when you say them, you mean them absolutely. It's completely true in every case, in every way that you could mean it. And there are certain things that are meant in a very qualified way. In fact, the teaching on the infallibility of the Pope. A lot of times people just don't even want to understand that. And then the Pope will say something, and it's like, I don't know if I agree with that. And then somebody will well, I thought you thought the Pope was infallible. Well, he's not infallible, absolutely. He's infallible when he's speaking in a certain station in a particular way. There are certain canonical procedures to go through. In those scenarios, in that qualified way, he's infallible. He's not infallible absolutely. So you can see it's related to, but somewhat different than the fallacy of accident. Okay. I will say this. I'm going to be a nice guy. I am not going to tell you, I'm not going to put on the quiz, is this the fallacy of accident or the fallacy of secundum quid? That's kind of unfair to make you parse between those two. And in fact, I guess I should say this. There's lots of things that are more than one fallacy. In fact, there's a fallacy called non sequitur, which means it does not follow. Almost all fallacies are also non sequiturs. So don't worry so much about, is it this one? Don't torture yourself as if it has to be only one fallacy. No, all kinds of things can be different ones. They overlap. Like I said, this is absolutely the loosest part of logic. This is not like a very formal scientific kind of thing. Number 5. What are the various types of fallacy? Ignoratio, elenchi. Ignoratio, elenchi. I don't think the CH is pronounced ch in Latin. Arguing beside the point or ignoring the issue, changing the subject. So let's look at page 202. This fallacy arises from falsely assuming that the point at issue has been disproved when one merely resembling it has been disproved. The point really at issue is consequently ignored. Ignoratio elenchi means ignorance of the nature of refutation. So these are fallacies that you commit when you don't really understand what an argument is. And there's a bunch of them, and all of these are quite common. But what they have in common is that they all really show that you don't even understand what it is to make a logical argument. First one, maybe the most common, bottom of page 202. Ad hominem. You've probably heard this around. When you attack the person, an argument to the man or against the man. So when you say, well, you did this, how can you be right about what you're saying if you committed this sin or you did this or now, if what you're arguing about is the virtue of that person, maybe that's relevant. But if you're arguing about, I don't know, which rock and roll band is the best, all right, you're arguing about which rock and roll band is the best, and the guy you're arguing with is saying it's the Beatles, and then someone else is saying it's, I don't know who else would even be in the running. It's like, I don't know, Guns N' Roses or something, like way later. You guys probably have never heard of either of those bands. Anyway, if you're arguing about that, and one guy says to the other, well, dude, Guns N' Roses was in town and you didn't even go see them. How can you say that they're the best? That's irrelevant. Whether this guy Fred went to see them in concert or not when they were in town has no bearing whatsoever on whether they're the greatest rock band of all time. It's just a totally irrelevant thing to bring up. And so you're attacking the person. This happens all the time. I mean, politics is full of this, where people drag up this dirt and look what this guy tweeted, a couple of years ago, and look how can you say this? And this guy cheated on his wife, and this guy did this to his kids, and whatever. I mean, that doesn't mean that this person is wrong about something that they're saying. What it might mean, don't fall into this. Just because something is a fallacy in one way doesn't mean it's always a fallacy. If the argument is about the character of the person, then ad hominem is not a fallacy. So sometimes if somebody's running for office, one of the things that is up for debate when you're running for office is your character as a person. And maybe if you're not a good, father to your family, maybe that does imply that you wouldn't be a good leader for a country. Maybe you'd have to make kind of a bigger argument, but in that case, talking about the character of the person would be relevant. It wouldn't be relevant if, well, how can you say abortion's wrong? You've done this or this or that. Or how can you say abortion is okay? You've done this or this. You don't attack the person. If you're talking about this topic, talk about the topic, not the person who's arguing for it or against it. Happens all the time. And again, you just kind of get sick of it. Look at all these Democrats who are like this and like this and like this. So what if they're like this? That doesn't mean their viewpoint is wrong. Look at all these Republicans that are like this and like this and like this. So what? Even if even if the generalization you're making is true, that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the viewpoint. It is a totally irrelevant thing. You're just attacking ad hominem. Okay. Argumentum ad populum. Next page. So this is another example of ignoratio elenchi. Argumentum ad populum fallacy arises from substituting an appeal to the passions and prejudices of the people for logical reasoning. So this fallacy is, well, everybody likes this. And if everybody likes it, the fallacy is, if everybody likes it, it must be good. Well, the most popular movie on I think that as of right now, if I'm not mistaken, the movie that has made the most money in all history is Avatar. You know, what's his name? The guy that made the Titanic movie, James Cameron. James Cameron's Avatar has made more money than any movie in all of history. That's an argument ad populum if you go from that to saying, therefore it is the best movie. There's a couple fallacies going on there. One, you're not adjusting for inflation. Two, so if you were to say, let's say you adjust for inflation and you're just counting the number of tickets sold, or you just adjust for inflation in general. In that case, I think the most popular movie of all time is Gone with the Wind. So now let's say you've shown it's actually the most popular movie of all time. Does that actually mean it's the best movie of all time? Absolutely not. It just means that the most people went to see it. That doesn't mean anything. So some things are popular that are terrible. Have you ever been to McDonald's? It's the most popular restaurant on the face of the earth, but that doesn't mean it's the best food in the world. Similarly, you wouldn't say that about movies or anything else. So argumentum ad populum, just because something is popular does not mean that it's good. All right. Argumentum ad misericordiam, this is an appeal to pity. So if you were to say, oh, look at how sad this situation is. Okay. If the argument stops there, yes, it is a sad situation. Okay, you haven't committed any fallacy. But look at how sad the situation is. What's the therefore? Is it therefore you should give me your money? I needed more of an argument there. Where do you find this appeal to pity, this argumentum ad misericordiam? You know those commercials of the abused animals that they find, they're like neglected or sad, and they like play a commercial and they show these. It really is heartbreaking. You feel bad for these things, and they play like a sad song, you know, whatever her name is, that artist that they use her songs for these like commercials. Okay, is it sad? Yes, I totally agree that it's sad. What does the commercial say though? You should give us your money because this is sad. I need more than that, buddy. What are you going to do with my money? How do I know that you're actually going to use this to help these animals? Actually, is that really the best use of my money? Maybe. It might be something that you're passionate about. That's great. More power to you. Maybe not. But there's more to the story than just this is a sad situation. You show like a war-torn country. Look at what happened to this country. Okay, I mean, my parents are from Iraq. That country's been absolutely devastated, decades and decades of war. Okay, is that sad? Absolutely. What conclusions are you going to draw from the sad situation? You might be appealing to pity and committing a fallacy there. Therefore, I don't know what, this person should be in government, or this person should be in power, or this should happen, or that should happen. You might need more for that argument, other than the fact that it's sad. Something sad happened. Argument ad baculum is the appeal to the big stick. It is most common in 4th grade, where you're disagreeing on something and the bully says, I'm going to beat you up if you don't agree with me. That is an argument ad baculum. Or, if you don't agree with this, you will be fired. You don't agree with this viewpoint, this political viewpoint. You don't agree with this social movement. And if you don't agree with it, we're going to delete your YouTube account. We're going to call you. We're going to dox you. You know what doxing is? Doxing is where somebody expresses an opinion that's not, even if it's a bad opinion, even if it's an objectively bad and evil opinion, you don't refute it by bullying the person that holds the opinion. If anything, I don't even see how that works at all. If anything, you're going to make them feel like a martyr, and now they're even more right. Doesn't help anybody. So these are arguments ad baculum. Okay, they're just fallacies. Argumentum ad ignorantiam is the use of an argument that sounds convincing to others because they're ignorant of the weakness of the argument and of the facts that stand against it. I think it's more about the facts that stand against it. Well, can you prove that this... No one has ever proved that aliens exist, therefore aliens do not exist. I'm on the next page. No one has ever proved that aliens do not exist, therefore aliens exist. Those are both totally bad arguments. Just because you can't prove the opposite doesn't mean that something is true. Or, sorry, just because you can't prove or disprove one point doesn't mean that the opposite is true. That's an argument towards ignorance, ad ignorantiam. You might see this around fairly often, actually. Russell's teapot. Bertrand Russell wrote this thing where he says, well, I'm gonna posit that there is a invisible teapot orbiting the Earth. And it's invisible, so you can't prove it's there, and you can't prove it's not there. And because you can't prove it's not there, it's okay for me to believe in it. And Bertrand Russell says that in order to kind of make fun of people that believe in God. There's a similar argument called the invisible flying spaghetti monster, where there's even like a kind of satirical church, right? Oh, we're the church of the invisible flying spaghetti monster. And again, though, the sort of idea behind it is, well, you can't prove that there isn't an invisible flying spaghetti monster. Therefore, therefore there is one. That is making fun of, those are both satires of, arguments ad ignorantiam. However, those also happen to be the fallacy of straw man, which she doesn't include in this chapter, weirdly. The argument of straw man is where you make your opponent say something that he's not actually saying. I have never in my life, and I have written books defending the existence of God, never in my life have I met a theist that says, my proof for God's existence is that you can't disprove him. Maybe somebody exists that says that, but I've never met one. And so for Bertrand Russell to pretend, or for the people of the parishioners of the Church of the invisible flying spaghetti monster, to act as if it's such a common thing for people to say, I believe in God because you can't disprove him, that's an absolute straw man fallacy. So make of that what you will. And then argumentum ad veracundiam is to quote an invalid authority. So you're quoting an authority, but it's an authority that doesn't really know what he or she is talking about. And so if you were to say, well, 9 out of 10 dentists approve this, floss, okay, that's fine. They actually know what they're talking about. That's an authority. You're appealing to a valid authority. If you were to say 9 out of 10 pop singers are voting for this political candidate, I mean, that's nice, good for them, but what do they know about politics? 8 out of 10 physicists, I don't think this is true, but let's say 8 out of 10 physicists don't believe in God. Okay, that's an interesting statistic. I'm glad somebody went around and found that statistic. What does it have to do with the existence of God? Absolutely nothing. And what do physicists have to say about God or not? I don't know. They do awesome work. I love it. My dad's a physicist, and I've written books on philosophy of physics and stuff like that. I think it's one of the greatest disciplines on the face of the earth. But it's not about God. So you can be an expert in one thing and not in everything. And you can be a celebrity and a great basketball player, but that doesn't mean you know what's the best thing to drink or the best pants to wear or the best person to vote for. So that's an argument ad veracundiam. Okay, that is all those are number 5. And I'm glad I got the straw man fallacy in there, even though she doesn't mention it. It's an important one. All right, last 2. This is going longer than I thought. What is the fallacy of post hoc ergo propter hoc? She's calling it the false cause. I'm the bottom of page 204. She's giving the Latin name, which I like. I like the Latin name. Post hoc ergo propter hoc. The Latin says, after this, therefore, because of this. False cause. Fairly common thing where people notice a thing happened and then something happened after it. Okay, fair enough. But the conclusion that they come to can be a fallacy where, well, this came after that. That means the first thing caused the second thing. And man, that is a very serious inductive fallacy. It shows you really don't understand the nature of causality. It might be true, but you need to do way more work to prove one thing caused another than to show it came after another thing, or one thing came after another, or it came before it, or whatever. It's way more work than to show one thing came before another. One of the common ones, people used to quote this all the time. I don't even know if it's true, but one of the things there was some study that somebody did. People who smoke a pipe, you know, the old-timey like Sherlock Holmes pipe. Apparently people that smoke a pipe, at some point this was true, I don't know if it's still true, live longer than people that don't smoke at all. Which, if true, it sounds kind of surprising. You might hear that and conclude, oh, therefore, pipe smoking causes longer life because it comes before it. You see why that's not true? Or that's not necessarily true. Maybe it is, but I don't think so. It might be a third thing causing both of those. Maybe the third thing is somebody who has a kind of leisured life. They have time to smoke a pipe. And because they have the time to smoke a pipe, they're more relaxed. And because they're more relaxed, they live longer. So it's not that pipe smoking is causing longer life. It's that both pipe smoking and a longer life are caused by some third thing, namely a leisured life. Be careful when you attribute causality to things. And this goes for vaccines cause autism or something like that. Oh, man. Well, they show, oh, look, and they just show a chart and it seems so convincing at first. Look, this is when they started this and this is when, all kinds of other things might be going on. First of all, you kind of want to question the chart, but even if those things happen at the same time, that does not mean one who's causing the other at all. There might be all kinds of other things might be following that exact same slope. Oh, look at, I don't know if you're a Catholic, you might have heard this before. Oh, Vatican II, the Second Vatican Council, caused all kinds of things to happen. It caused Catholics to start using contraception. It caused Catholics to stop believing in the Eucharist. And what's your argument there? Well, it happened and then all these other things happened after it. You know, billions of things happened in the 1960s and 70s, right? Not just the Second Vatican Council. Billions and billions of events happened that could have affected all kinds of stuff, including an entire upheaval of social life all over the world, especially in the West. And that when the council was not a cause of that. It was, if anything, effective. That I don't even know if it was an effect. So just because one thing comes before another doesn't mean it caused it. Please don't fall into that fallacy. You sound so dumb when you fall into that fallacy. Okay. Finally, again, there's tons and tons of other fallacies. There's some nice exercises on page 206 and 207 that she gives you, and you can kind of name the fallacy or fallacies that are being committed there. Anyway, page 205. Begging the question. What does begging the question mean? Begging, please pay attention to this. Begging the question means circular reasoning. Begging the question is when somebody says, I believe in God because the Bible says that there's a God, and the Bible has to be true because God wrote it. Do you see how that's circular reasoning? You're not thinking in a straight line anymore. Your conclusion is not based on premises. It's based on itself. And that's a bad way to reason. Circular reasoning, another name for circular reasoning, is begging the question. Very smart people think that the word begging the question, oh, this begs the question. Very smart people think that when you beg the question, what that means is it's like you're begging me to ask this question. This begs us to ask this question. No, it does not mean that. The phrase begging the question doesn't mean that. It's sort of starting to come to mean that because people are using this in the wrong way. Please don't use begging the question to mean it's just begging me to ask the question. If you want to say that, say this suggests the question. This points to the question, something like that. Don't say begging the question. It means the phrase begging the question means circular reasoning. So that's number 7. What does begging the question mean? What does it not mean? Emphatically, it does not mean that. Exercises. The heart is an organ, page 206. An organ is a musical instrument, therefore the heart is a musical instrument. That is equivocation, right? You're using organ in 2 different ways. Speaking of the silent is impossible. John is silent, therefore speaking of John is impossible. I think that's a fallacy of accident. So John, that's an aspect, it's an accident of John. It's not John's identity. She's quoting Othello. Do you know, sirrah, where Lieutenant Cassio lies? I dare not say he lies anywhere. Why, man? He's a soldier. And for one to say a soldier lies is stabbing. So lies and lies is another equivocation. Another pun. Lots of puns in Shakespeare. Lots of puns in rap music too. If you're not a rap fan, but there's lots of them there. And then your dads make a lot of puns. Louise is not what Mary is. Louise is a woman, therefore Mary is not a woman. That's another equivocation, I think, or it could be a fallacy of accident. I don't know. Lots of those. Actually, she's using those over and over again. I see some competition and division there. Anyway, take a look at these. Practice a little bit. Lots of websites on fallacies. Take a look at those. Okay, I guess that's it for today. Right under an hour. And then quiz after this class, I suggest. And then after that, we're going to move to rhetoric. See you when I see you.